Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening to celebrate the official launch of White Coal City, a memoir of place and family by Robert Boschman. My name is Ariel Hudnall, and I'm a member of the University of Regina Press staff. I'll be your event technician for the evening. We're going to start the event shortly, but before we do, I just wanted to address a bit of housekeeping. To start with, everyone's microphones are going to be turned off for the duration of this event. The event is live and is being simulcast to YouTube. So if you would prefer not to have your face in a public video, please refrain from turning on your camera during the event. The event's going to begin with a conversation between Robert and moderator Sam McKegney before concluding with an audience Q&A. Throughout the evening, please submit any questions you have in the chat feature below. You should be able to find it in the bottom bar of your Zoom window. While we may not have time to get to every question, we hope to answer as many as possible before the evening concludes. A reminder also that you can pick up your copy of White Coal City at uofrpress.ca. That's uofrpress.ca. For those in attendance tonight, we have a special discount code for you. You can use WWC15, all caps, and receive 15% off your copy. Finally, please be mindful that we strive to facilitate the safest possible place for our authors, panelists, and guests. Please show kindness and respect to everyone in attendance. I am pleased now to introduce Acquisitions Editor Karen Clark for our land acknowledgement and to say a few words about the book.
Thanks, Ariel. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just trying to get to my notes. I'm sorry. You'd think after all these months, this would be second nature. Well, they're not. Sorry, I'm just going to turn off my video for a second.
Everyone gets to see me again. Hi. Tell us in the chat how you're doing this evening. What part of Canada and the United States are you from? What's going on in your life? Okay, I'll leave now.
I'm ready. I'm just again not. Am I here? Oh dear.
Yes, you are.
Okay, I sure hope that can be edited out. Okay, oh wow. So this day has come, Rob, and welcome everyone to the launch of White Coal City, a memoir of place and family. I'm Karen Clark. I don't want to admit it after that start. I'm the acquisitions editor at University of Regina Press. I'm currently coming to you from Regina, Uskana. That's the Nehiyaw word for bones. And I want to begin my own part in tonight's discussion with the acknowledgement and recognition and much gratitude and respect to the peoples and ancestors of Treaty 4 territories. These are the Nehiyaw, the Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota nations, as well as the Michif peoples. And we're on these lands at University of Regina, and that's where I myself reside. My ancestors made treaty with these peoples, and the University of Regina Press and myself are seeking to be in good relations in the years to come. I want to briefly say hi to Rob because we actually haven't seen each other thanks to COVID and everything else. And congratulations, Rob. Thank you for entrusting me and all the staff at the University of Regina Press with your family's story. Rob's what an editor might call an ideal author with whom to work. We met in 2014 at an environmental conference in Moscow, Idaho, and then in Saskatchewan, and then in Calgary. And I hope to see you soon in Saskatchewan too. From the start, Rob has been respectful, engaged, devoted, patient and impatient. And we had some long and difficult conversations and some wonderful exchanges and really meaningful dialogues and emails over the past 7 years together. I'm so excited for you, Rob, and your story. And I just want to end this little bit of a ramble by saying Costco has purchased White Coal City in all 3 Saskatchewan stores, Prince Albert, Saskatoon, Regina. So you can, if you're in Saskatchewan and it's safe to go, you can go and get it there. And that's a big deal for a press like ourselves. And it speaks to the importance of Rob's story, to the incredible writing of Rob. And I'm so proud of you and that you've brought this Saskatchewan story out into the world now. So thank you for that. Okay, Sam McKegney. I also have the great gift of working with Sam McKegney. He's a settler scholar of Indigenous literatures and is a professor, head of the Department of English at Queen's University in the territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples. His latest book, which I could have actually had, but it's at the office and I'm not there, but it's called Carrying the Burden of Peace, Reimagining Indigenous Masculinities Through Story. And the University of Regina Press will have it out next month for y'all. He's published 2 previous books with University of Manitoba Press, a wonderful press too, our neighbors. Those books are Masculinities, Conversations about Indigenous Manhood and Magic Weapons, and Masculinities. And the second one, the third book now of his is his first one, Magic Weapons, Aboriginal Writers Remaking Community After Residential School. He's also published articles on such topics as masculinity, environmental kinship, prison writing, and mythologies of hockey. So the perfect person to interview Rob with White Coal City. And I just want to say too that he is the principal investigator for the Indigenous Hockey Research Network. This is a collective of Indigenous and settler allied researchers who are working with community organizations to decolonize Canada's national winter sport. And you can find more information about that at www.indigenoushockeycanada.com. That's one word, and I'm sure we can put it in the chat for you. So welcome everyone on behalf of University of Regina Press and the entire staff team there. And congratulations, Rob, and I'll turn it over to you, Sam. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Karen, for those lovely words of introduction. And it's great to see you, by the way. And as much as this is a celebration of Rob's work, everyone who is involved in publishing recognizes this is a feat of many people. Among them, very highly, is Karen. So thank you so much for being here and for those words. As was mentioned, I'm coming to you from Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territory in Kingston, Ontario. And I'd just like to further reflect that I teach at the Queen's University in the Kingstown. And that is just a reminder to us all, I guess, that settler colonialism is not a distant historical inheritance, but is rather the terrain in which we gather, virtual or otherwise. And it's something that Rob's book grapples with in such a powerful and eloquent way. It gives me great joy to introduce my friend Rob Boschman, who is chair of the Department of English, Languages and Cultures at Mount Royal University. He's a scholar, an artist, an activist in the fields of environmental humanities and place studies. And I could regale you with his many accomplishments. I could speak with you about his multiple award-winning conferences that he has co-organized. I could speak with you about his co-edited collections in the field of environmental humanities. I could talk with you about his earlier publications, but I'd rather not do that. What I would rather do is tell you a little bit about a characteristic of Rob's that I greatly admire. Rob has a relentless, even ferocious curiosity and a generosity with his passions. From books to bees, from cars to cameras, from scholarship to sports, from environmentalism to decolonization to racial justice, Rob's passions are legion, and they inform the kind of critical and creative sensibility capable of authoring a striking debut memoir like the one we're going to celebrate tonight. A book that Joe Fiorito calls hard as a punch in the mouth, sweet as a kiss on the forehead. And Canada's poet laureate, the great Cree poet Louise Bernice Half, describes as an examination of the human spirit, its hurts, its survival, its hopes, and its faith. Please join me in welcoming Rob Boschman.
Thank you, Sam.
if we weren't all muted, there'd be like thunderous applause right now. But yeah, actually you can see some of it if you look at the top of the screen. There's applause happening there. So first of all, congratulations on the book. It's beautiful, it's hard, it's demanding, and I would posit it is liberatory with its reckonings. Congratulations.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you for your support. It means a lot to me to have you here today, and to have this public dialogue with you in particular, because we go back a long ways and we share common interests and convictions and passions about the land that we live on. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the Treaty 7 lands where I and my family live in Calgary, the ancestral and traditional territory of the Kainai, the Piikani, and Siksika, as well as the Tsuut'ina, Nakota, and Métis Nation of Calgary. And with every day that passes, you know, I feel stronger about the historical facts on the ground where we live and where we have our lives, and how important it is to acknowledge and live in acknowledgement of the reality of the land and the water and the air. So
absolutely. Well, these are all areas that I want to get to, so don't preempt my questions. That's not fair.
Okay.
But what I would love to do, and if we have time, is I have about 4 areas of questioning I'd like to get to. One involving authorship and history, one involving the environment and place, one involving sport and masculinity, and lastly involving settler colonialism and complicity. Now, you may not get there, but we're going to try. Everyone, as we're going through this over the next 25 minutes or so, feel free to throw your questions into the chat, and we'll get to some of those at the end, okay? But my first question for you, Rob, is, now this story, White Coal City, the book is haunted by a devastating incident that befell your paternal grandparents when your father was only 2 years old. And perhaps you could offer a little glimpse into that incident, but my 2 questions for you are these.
Yeah.
One, when did you recognize that that incident had woven itself into the very fabric of your family? And then secondly, when did you know you had to write about it?
Well, you know, the memory I have is a memory of Christmas 1970, which I describe in the book. And that arose out of a conversation or an opening, I guess, that my grandmother Edith brought into being. And how old was I then? 9 years old. I was 9 years old, and it was Christmas. And I had questions about my grandfather, who had passed away 2 years earlier, almost to the day. And I remember feeling really nervous about asking this question that was on my mind that I wanted to ask Grandma. And the question was, you know, do you ever feel like Grandpa's still around? You know, these are questions that kids have. Do you ever feel his ghost around here? That kind of thing. And it took me it took me a while to work up the nerve to ask that question. And I felt a little sheepish and almost impolite about it. But Grandma came around and said, "Oh yeah, it was just, yeah, sure, yeah, I feel Johnny around here all the time." And it was so matter of fact that I felt relieved. And then she went down to the pantry and came up with this box. And I can remember that moment. And there were kids all around, and she popped the top off this box that I have here now and have had with me all my life. And we all looked inside, and she said, "You know, there was another woman before me, and her name was Margaret, and she was killed in a car accident She was run over by a car by a man named Harry D. Reid, a traveling salesman from Toronto. And that's, I realized in that instant that was my father's mother. And these things happen in split seconds, right? It's just this new shape coalescing in my memory and in my mind, and it was instantaneous. And I remember looking at my dad and seeing him differently. So that was the moment in which that came alive for me and became a thing. And then I think there was some debate in the family around where the box would go first, and it didn't come to our house first. It went to Marvin's house first. Marvin, who I write about in the book. And then it came to our house. And I have to say, to be quite honest, it never left our house. And when I came into my young adulthood, I took it. And I think I knew from young adulthood. I can remember being a psych nurse and working in the Royal University Hospital and doing graveyard shifts and reading those. I would take them with me to keep me up at night. I was 21 years old, and I would read those letters at night through the long hours into the morning. And I knew then that I was going to do something with this. It just felt like a question that needed to be answered. Your mute is on, Sam. Can we unmute Sam?
Sorry, everyone, I'm trying. My computer's not connecting.
Well, I'll just keep talking. So in that moment, yeah, I took it upon myself to someday tell this story, and I knew it would take a long time. Okay, Sam, you're unmuted now.
Well, my apologies for that. I was trying to be all polite by muting myself, but I shan't do it again. That anecdote was really significant to me, and it shows sort of the interwoven way in which families connect, right? And in investigating and then telling not this story, but these stories, you're beholden to the voices of a lot of people. You share the voices of a lot of people in this memoir.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I'd like to ask you about that is, I'll put in the words of David Sherry Andy, the great novelist, who said, "What, if anything, do we owe the memories of others?" So what responsibility did you feel writing this story about the memories of these folks in your family?
Yeah, well, this was something that Karen and I talked about a great deal, and I've wrestled with it a lot. And one of the things that I wanted was, well, I'll tell you what I didn't want. I didn't want this to be the kind of memoir where the author, acting as the authority, tells a story in one third person voice and just beginning, middle, end, and lays it down. I just didn't feel that was right for this story. It is right for some stories. I'm not saying that it's not. But for this one, I felt there were so many voices coming out of that box, but also voices of people in my family, conversations with siblings and cousins, my father, my great uncle Bill, Kirby, voices in my head, and I knew what their language was like, and I knew what their rhythms were like. And I wanted to make sure I tried my very best to stay true to that. And there's another reason. I'm not comfortable with being dominating. I don't feel that that's, and this is increasingly so in my life as I grow older. I'm not comfortable with being dominating. And I think that sometimes literary bodies of literature in English and quite possibly in other written languages take on aspects of dominion and authority and intransigent truth. And I guess I have a bone to pick with that, because I think that's part of the problem as I see it. And so I wanted to construct the story, stay true to the story, stay true to the voices, but not put it together in a way that said, I'm the final word here. To put it down in a way that invited the reader to put it together themselves as well, right? And create it together.
Well, as a reader, I'm really grateful for that stylistic element. And it seems to me to be extremely effective in, and so for those of you who have not yet read the book and are all going to go out and purchase it, I hope. I mean, it's told in these snapshot vignettes. It sort of reminds me of Jesse Thistle's From the Ashes. You know, there's these brief bursts of energy and inspiration that take you from moment to moment and make you turn the page so swiftly. And it's across time and space. So it's not like you start on page one and you work through the story from an historical moment to a future moment. And it strikes me that that's how memory works. And that's how history works, in that it's constantly being re-understood, and it's gaining, you know, greater impressions in this way or that based on the experiences of the present. So I just want to congratulate you on capturing that so vividly, and I just think it's beautifully done. But let's talk about land and place for a second.
Sure.
The story again, and I've never even been to Prince Albert, so apologies to PA folks in the crowd, but it brings the Prince Albert of your youth to life really effectively. And it strikes me that Prince Albert from the memoir is so marked. Its very landscape is marked by history and race and class. And you see it in the land and you see it in the institutions. So I wonder if you might reflect for a moment or two on the place, the land, and the institutions, and how those produce meaning for you.
Well, as you know, I opened the book with a metaphor and the memory of a friend I had who got a Prince Albert when his wife left him. And that, I'm so thankful for that sentence. It came like a gift to me, you know, that would be the way I could start from there. And that it wasn't just about him, it was about me too. That it was that this metaphor of a piercing that I can't imagine getting, but I did see it, is a kind of wound on the land itself. And it's not a Turtle Island thing that I know of. It's an imported thing, named after a member of the Royals. And so I wanted to start there and see what would happen. And so PA for me begins with that, but it also included there is the history and values and class structures of another country on another continent that had the audacity and arrogance to make an incursion on another continent and assume by default that the language and values and religion and economies that it carried were somehow transcendent and the way. And so you get a town like PA and all the other towns like it across the entire continent that are built on those assumptions. And here I am, a little kid growing up in that place, and 2 blocks away is the jail built in the year after the end of the Riel resistance. And on the other side of the laundromat where I grew up and live, and yes, it really happened, is All Saints Residential School. And the little kids who are going past the laundromat to go to Vincent Massey School are coming from that residential facility every day, and I'm walking with them to school. And I know their names, and they know my name, and it just seems like, in some ways, like a bad dream now, But I know that it's a reality. It's still a reality. It's ongoing. It's an ongoing reality. And it is the factual, historical reality of the nation state of Canada. And
may I ask if, in going back over this period in your life, was there a sense of disillusionment, like that there had been, there have been experiences as a younger version of yourself that were now being refracted through a different critical sensibility, and you were seeing the colonial history in a way that, as a child, you simply live and inherit as natural?
yeah, but I was scared as a child. I lived in fear because fear was palpable in the air, even though I was a white settler child and didn't know or understand all of what that meant and entailed. I would come to understand it through my Uncle Bill and through my sister Crystal. But I was always afraid. And I don't think that I was alone in that experience of looking over my shoulder and being really taught with anxiety and uncertainty about what might happen to me that day, who I might meet, and what could unfold that would be unpleasant, and it could happen at any time.
That sense of fear and anxiety and the sort of omnipresence of the possibility of violence, comes through on the page in the memoir. And I guess it leads me to a series of questions about masculinity and about hockey too.
Yeah,
because hockey is such a big presence in White Coal City. And you'll note that Bobby Orr is over my shoulder, who plays a part in terms of being your hero as a younger person. But I want to ask you about hockey in the memoir, because I feel like you get the ambivalence of sports so powerfully. The sense of its attractiveness, that these nationalist myths about how hockey can bring us together, like they're there. At the same time, it's this space of exclusion. It's a place of violence. It's a place of misogyny. So, take me through some of the hockey experience and why you think hockey is important to discuss in a critical way.
Well, and then there are the origins of hockey. But yeah, I can remember first the joy of playing road hockey outside on the car wash pad that my grandpa had made. And it was just the best. I knew that there was no better place in PA to play hockey than on that pad to play shinny, because it was lit and it was all cement. There was no cars coming through. It wasn't a street. And so everybody gravitated there, and yeah, we had a lot of fun. My brother and all our friends were there, and it was a blast. We would play until we were just exhausted and then drag ourselves to bed. But that changed. And then there was the joy of playing, just as a wee little guy, like squirt and pee-wee hockey, and even bantam hockey was great. As long as I was playing in the B leagues, it was fun. But once I got noticed in the B leagues, and my coach got noticed, and we both got elevated into the A leagues, it changed dramatically. And I dreaded it. It was high stress. It was a lot of intimidation and unpleasantness in the locker room, and proving who you were as a human being, proving your worth. And I failed on all counts. And that was the end of that. But I think that in terms of connected to the structure of PA and the institutions at work there, and the fact that the team I played on, all the teams I played on were all white. we did play against teams that were First Nations and Métis. And I respected those hockey teams. Everybody did. But the sense of being in an environment where you were not there to have fun, even though you were 12 years old, and you were there to make sure that you got a report card from your coach that indicated that you were worthy of continuing on that team and in that club. Otherwise, you were out and disgraced, which happened to me. And I'm not alone in that experience. And I think it continues that way right up through into the professional leagues.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the way that the infrastructure of sport can be isolating as well as exclusionary, right? It creates those experiences for youth right through to adulthood. Mm-hmm. And I really think you capture it very, very effectively.
Yeah, and it leaves memories too, you know?
Yeah.
One would think that the memories of those memories of childhood where you had an unpleasant experience with teammates and coaches, you would think that those would dissipate over time, but they don't. They don't.
Mm-hmm. Well, can I ask you, since we're talking about some of the difficult experiences, and you know we're connected a little bit to masculinity in those discussions, I really want to talk with you about violence and how it proliferates intergenerationally within families, mm-hmm. And yet there can be like an attractiveness to violence, even as we recognize it as wrong. There's a scene in the book, it's probably one of my favorite paragraphs in the whole book, where you're talking about your older cousin Digger and you know his erratic violence, and sort of hopeful or wishing that it could be absorbed into, you know, some kind of ethic, like there was a purpose for it and the guy deserved it and whatever. But you were nonetheless attracted to the violence. So, you know, what's at play there? And how can we get beyond the attractiveness of violence like that? Or are we doomed because of our conditioning to continue to see that as attractive?
Boy, that's a big question, and maybe one of the biggest questions that I'm trying to grapple with in White Coal City, and ask it as a question, not knowing the answer. But I do think that violence as an activity and as a value is carried on intergenerationally through families, and that it attaches itself to our memories in ways that we don't even realize, you know, often. And I saw in my cousin someone I love very much, continue to. He was what I call my me, not me. He was, you know, when we're children and we attach ourselves to a cousin we love and they're almost symbiotic with us, and we identify so much, we don't know where the end of that person is and the beginning of our person. And I felt that so tremendously with my cousin Digger. And I knew that I was nothing like him, but yet we were connected by kinship. And he was beautiful to me, you know. He was everything I wasn't. He was beautiful, he was physical, he was graceful, he was powerful, he could beat anybody up. Yeah, I never, you know, I never had to feel that fear that I felt that I mentioned earlier. Never had to worry about that if I was with him. No worries. But as I grew older and as I started to think about this story, I started to realize that the things that I witnessed as a child and that I was a part of as a child were transmitted through events and through persons. And I think that that's what epigenetic theory teaches us. And it flows right down to landscapes. There's a wonderful book called Epigenetic Landscapes that I highly recommend. And so what I saw in my cousin and in my other cousins and in my father and in myself was that we were in a way unwitting avatars of somebody else's event. That the trauma that had, I would argue, happened to my grandfather was still playing itself out through me, and I didn't even know it. At the cellular level, these things carry on, and you pass them on. You then transmit them too. And I think that then from there's another step to take, and that is, well, if this has happened to me, what about all the people around me? And if it's happened to the people around me, let's push farther on that and say, what about all the people who have been living here for millennia? At a minimum, 13,000 years, but probably far longer. We keep pushing that number back, and we keep finding out more about the nations, the languages, the cultures, the populations of the Americas from where we are now all the way down to Tierra del Fuego. And it's the more we find out, the more we all are informed. And colonialism has produced a giant trauma that is unimaginably larger than my family's story of grief and loss. So I think it produces an invitation to empathy. And I'm hoping that white settler readers and other non-Indigenous readers of White Coal City will see that in their own stories, that they are not disconnected. Far from it. We are now part of the truth and reconciliation process by just examining these things. But the reconciliation cannot happen without truth first. You can't have the one without the other.
That's extremely powerfully articulated just there. And I want to ask you, I realize that we're getting to the point where I need to open things up to other questions, but I want to probe further a little bit in this direction, because the memoir grapples, well, and you know, you're a white, heterosexual, able-bodied male settler author.
Yeah.
Grappling with settler colonialism. Yeah. In the ways that it has impacted your own life and your family's lives, and basically the nature of complicity, and what does responsibility mean in a moment like this. And I want to ask, you know, you had remarkably progressive parents, and as they are depicted in the story, and your father was an outspoken advocate of Indigenous rights. You know, your Uncle Bill, said that PA should be changing its name, and the Indigenous peoples will know what it should be called. You know, this is a really interesting and progressive group, and you're reckoning with the fact that you were involved in the 60s scoop with the adoption of your sister.
Yeah.
Right? So can you just tell us a little bit about what it has been like to grapple with the reality of that complicity but its messiness and its possibility?
Well, first of all, it has to be acknowledged. And I hope that at least I've made some kind of beginning of acknowledgement to my sister, Crystal, and her kinship network, for whom I have great respect and admiration. And I thank her from the bottom of my heart. You know, when she came into our family, one of the things I really remember my parents saying is, well, she's going to give us more than we've ever given her. And they said that repeatedly. And I can say right sitting here tonight how true that is. It's right here. So there's that. And the whole notion of examining what you have lived through and what has happened where you were a child is, I think, immensely valuable. No matter where we come from or what our background is, or where we are now, I think that examining our childhood conditions is an opportunity and can bring about tremendous further opportunities and be quite liberating, while also very uncomfortable. So yeah, there was no way that we could that we could come from PA and not be complicit in PA. That's the nature of the wound. That's the nature of that piercing. If you think you're not part of it, I'm sorry, you're just wrong. So
That's a great answer. I'm going to open things up in just a moment to questions. So please get those in, and Ariel will top spin them my way. But my last question for you is, with relation to truth and reconciliation,
yeah,
and with relation to the ongoing nature of settler colonialism, what do you hope this work offers, like this memoir offers, to both settler readers and to Indigenous readers? What are your hopes for what this book can do in the world?
Be a humble contribution. It's the least I feel I can do.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask our first question from the audience, and that is from Sarah. How did the experience of finding out about your grandmother's death and the subsequent realization that you were part of a family that didn't talk about trauma influence your own parenting style?
Ha ha ha. That's a great one. Thank you for that question. Well, there's nothing off limits for me. I'll communicate, talk. I'm painfully transparent. Gets me into trouble. But I don't know any other way. And I guess the book in that sense is just a product of that value for me, and of trying to find the words and the structure again to be faithful to my experience and to be faithful to the way memory works.
I have a question here from Susan, and I'm wondering if it might be the brilliant Susan Gingell. Warm congratulations, Rob. We white folk tend to think that we see the world through transparent lenses. In fact, our way of seeing is colored by our whiteness.
Mm-hmm.
Your book and what you have said tonight shows you have found your own awareness. Can you speak to how you got there and how others can come to a similar awareness?
Well, I don't feel like I'm there. No way. But I think that listening is really important. And oftentimes we're listening even when we don't think we're listening. And then we listen again to what we were listening to, and we turn it over in our minds. And I think that kind of listening is really, really important. When you hear something that someone says, and then it becomes a memory, and then you turn it over and over and over, and you might do that, turn it over like a pebble in your pocket for years. That pebble's pretty important. You better pull that out of your pocket and take a really good look at it, because it's trying to tell you something. And I'm still learning, and I make mistakes and try to correct myself. But it's an ongoing process, and I think there's a kind of double awareness that I'm working on right now, to always be aware of my awareness, that my awareness is inherited and created and a legacy of someone else. And I have a choice in the matter. I don't have to be that. I can think outside that and step outside that and go, I don't want that. There's something else over here that I think is important, and it makes me uncomfortable, but I got to go over there and look at it. I think that that's really important, and I hope that I can continue to improve in that way, and that my story will help others do similar things.
That kind of productive discomfort that you're talking about, that form of reckoning is so crucial, and you sense it, like you sense it in reading the book. There's a question here from Nicole. Can you speak more about the challenges and responsibilities of holding the box, of holding your family's history? Did you feel obligated to get permission from living family members, for instance, with relation to this work?
Yeah. For the most part, yes. There are some points where you can't. But one of the things I tried to do over the 11 years that I was writing it was to get it out to people for comment, because I was, anxious about it and felt the responsibility of it, and I continue to do that. The box, I don't know what I will do with the box, but I'm thinking I would like to see it survive me, and maybe a safe place would be a library, maybe an archive at the University of Saskatchewan Library or University of Regina would be appropriate places for this box to go, for others to examine.
There's a question from Michelle about the title of the book, White Coal City. Why did you land on White Coal City, and what does that mean to you?
Well, early on, and from childhood, I I knew that that during the period where this hydroelectric dam was being funded and constructed on the North Saskatchewan River, that during that period, just before the Great War, so just before 1914, PA's nickname was White Coal City, because the hydropower at that time was referred to as white coal. And so White Coal City, I think, was always a natural possibility. And I know that the folks at University of Regina Press were on board with that. It has historical ramifications, it has colonial ramifications, and it also has identity metaphorical evocations.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the way that it resonates with, the failed dam, the idea of manipulating the landscape and the natural runnings of the waters in hopes of exploiting that for wealth and gain. And that it's this failure of the past that is omnipresent, in the text.
Yep.
So well chosen, and good work, University of Regina Press. There's a question from Karen Clark, but she would like to articulate it herself. So she will be unmuting momentarily and offering a question to you.
Sure.
I'm back. I'm so glad to know that another reader asked about the title. That was one of the things I was going to ask you about, Rob, if you felt comfortable talking to the folks about the other title possibilities that you and I had gone through, and then I would pitch them around the editorial marketing table at U of R Press, and we would go back and forth. And it was a struggle of mine too. And I'm just going to say a couple of things about it because I think it is a good learning moment both for readers and publishers and writers. But and it's one of the reasons I so respected Rob throughout the whole thing was I didn't know. I'm from Saskatchewan. I grew up in Indian Head, Saskatchewan, and there's so much I didn't know, about my home. And I know Tim Lilburn writes about this, that we can't really belong to this land because, and I'm a land person. I like so many need to get outside and into the land every day to be okay. And Tim Lilburn talks about we can't really belong here. We don't even know the names. We don't know what the plants are called, what the birds are called. There's been this imposition of colonial words onto these non-human beings and the waters. So for me, I admit, I didn't know Prince Albert was called white coal. I didn't know the Nehiyaw word, which I can't say because I don't have it at my fingertips. And that's again about not belonging to this land still. But the meeting place or sitting pretty place, where those Key Saskatchewan River flows swiftly and they meet there at this place we now call Prince Albert. And I know we talked about it at the press. We loved this title, Sitting Pretty Place. It was so evocative and beautiful. And then we talked about it's just laid bare what's happened here and elsewhere. Something so beautiful and mindful of the waters and the people, sitting pretty place, the meeting place where the water brings us together is then, placed on a map as Prince Albert and known to others as White Coal City, the extractive industries. We also talked about calling it cross eyes, because it was also this way of seeing of yours that that is so revealing and different, the way you see. And we talked about like something working with cross eyes in the title. I do wonder how you feel at the end of all those options with White Coal City. And I do wonder how you feel with the idea of Tim Lilburn, because I know a lot of white settlers are beginning to learn or try to learn at least the Indigenous names, and they feel a sense of belonging with just each little word that they acquire. So I guess I'm going to pass it on to you as you go forward with your writing. Will you incorporate more Indigenous names, words into your writing, not to claim the place as your own, but to acknowledge it? And what do you think about, non-Indigenous writers doing so? So I'll hopefully mute myself now and take myself back off the screen.
Well, actually don't know if I'll do any more writing. I think maybe this might be it. But will continue to write in the terms of the other projects that I'm working on, and always be mindful and committed to knowing as much as I can of what was here before and what continues to be here, and be open to learning the names of places and animals and plants. And it's through language that we know, right? Arguably, we know our world through language. And so your language is your knowledge base. And when a language is lost, then that entire culture and language base that might be millennia old is also lost. And that's irreversible and irredeemable and tremendous. It pains me greatly.
Well, I note that we're at 9 o'clock, but before we close things off tonight, there's one comment that has just come in from the YouTube screening of this event, and I think it's a wonderful way to close things off. This is from Tony, who writes, "Mr. Boschman, I admire the message you and the story tell in regards to truth and reconciliation. I salute you for helping to get that message across to everyone. As a former residential school student for 10 years and having worked in 2 law firms and being fired for being honest because I could never take the money awarded for their compensation, I've worked with several elders and my own former classmates. Many have never had the chance to live a full life because of the intergenerational trauma. Alcohol, drugs, suicide was sometimes the only way. And it is hard to witness the message that many of the elders wanted the world to know is exactly what you do. Tell the world the truth about these impacts and what it has done to our people. I'm sorry I do not have a question, but just this to say, from the bottom of my heart and those who have gone on to the spirit world, I type this with tears in my eyes. Keep up the great work and thank you. It is such a relief to many of us who have lived this to see and hear a person like yourself to do what you do. I know there are many like you with the same mindset that makes us feel there is hope. Miigwech." So I feel
I'm deeply honored. I'm deeply honored. And I just want to thank Tony and pay my respect to Tony. And thank everybody here who's turned out for this. I'm very humbled and I'm very honored.
Well, with that, it's been a delight to speak with you, Rob. I can't wait for the next time when it's in person and we can continue these conversations. I remind everyone that you have access to a 15% discount on White Coal City if you go to University of Regina Press, the website, and you can use WCC15 in caps for that. And thank you so much for your kind attention and for thinking so rigorously with us this evening. And congratulations again to Rob Boschman on this great feat. And I see much clapping going on.
Thank you. I'm honored. Thank you. Good night. Hello, Susan. I see you.